The Falcons, Bills, Bengals, Jags, Saints, and Jets are all on bye. So I'm sure there are actually some people that desperately need a waiver wire pickup this week. Not going to lie to you, not a ton of super interesting running backs. This is probably the week of the tight end. We'll have some defensive streamers, obviously a quarterback pickup or two, and then also some wide receivers. I'll sprinkle in a running back or two just in case you need one, but in reality, that's not really going to help you out much this week. Now, of course, before we get to the guys that we want to add, let me first recap the players that we need to drop. And I'll start it off with a massive L that I have to take. I said last week that Diontae Johnson could have been an interesting pickup. I thought the first 2 weeks with Baltimore really was understandable that he had no role whatsoever if you just look at the timeline with how long he was with the team. But now you see a larger sample here with Diontae Johnson, and they're just not getting him involved at all. And realistically speaking, even if you were to expand his role and start seeing 50, 60% of the snaps in the coming weeks, he still is not going to be somebody that you could actually put in your starting lineup. So Diontae, probably a safe drop. I actually picked up Khalil Herbert on the waiver wire in the Flock League last week, just thinking, oh, maybe he actually sees a slightly larger role with the second week in Cincinnati. But nope, Khalil Herbert does absolutely nothing, doesn't see the field at all. I already dropped him, and I don't even know who I'm going to be picking up this week myself. Demarcus Robinson, very easy drop. I mean, I understand that maybe he threw some people off a couple weeks back, scoring touchdowns with both Puka and Kupp in this offense. But the reality of the situation, again, is this is the most condensed offense in the NFL. Really, the only players that are touching the ball are Kupp, Puka, Kyren. That's not changing anytime soon. The only reason you would ever look at Demarcus Robinson is if one of those receivers got injured. But in reality, we already saw both of them get injured, and Demarcus Robinson wasn't even viable then. Tank Bigsby was an easy drop last week. I'll reiterate, if you still have him, go ahead and drop him. Because the thing is, even if Travis Etienne were to get injured, with how bad this Jags offense is, you still can't start Bigsby. I mean, Etienne's the only running back that really sees the field this past week, and Etienne's not viable. Obviously, it was a tough matchup, but this is right now the worst offense in the NFL. Bigsby's injured. He's a handcuff at best, not worth the roster spot. Gus Edwards, we had on the waiver wire video last week. I thought Edwards was an interesting pickup with him expanding his role in Los Angeles. But in reality, you still have Dobbins as the 3-down back here. And even if Dobbins were to get injured, then at that point, Edwards is probably splitting the backfield with Kamani Vidal, and Edwards won't have a role as a receiver. So I think Edwards is an easy drop in favor of some of the other premium handcuff backs, such as a player like Tyler Algier. Mike Gesicki, very easy drop. You actually see the target volume fall dramatically the second that T. Higgins is back in this offense. And you would have to hold him through the bye week. There's no reason to do so. There's also no reason to hold Dawson Knox through the bye week. If you picked him up because maybe you lost Sam Laporta, maybe you lost Dalton Kincaid, he was a very viable play, and it was a good call on your part. But in reality, now you have the Bills with the Week 12 bye. And by the time you get to Week 13, there's a good shot Dalton Kincaid is back. Even if Kincaid's not back, you could have Keon Coleman, and the target volume could fall very easily for the tight end in this offense. So no real interest with Dawson Knox. The Patriots receivers, I mean, again, they're just getting too many players involved here. While Drake May has shown flashes, I don't want to roster a single receiver in New England. Mike Williams is going to be an easy drop here in Pittsburgh. While the passing volume is definitely better with Russell Wilson under center, still at the same time, George Pickens is absolutely dominating the target volume in this offense. Adonai Mitchell, Alec Pierce are both going to be easy drops as well. We recommended picking up Adonai Mitchell at the waiver wire last week, but at the time we made that video, which of course I got to apologize for, we had the understanding that Joe Flacco was going to be under center and that Michael Pittman Jr. was injured. While of course Anthony Richardson had a good week this past week, still a lot of that came on the ground with the multiple rushing touchdowns. That's not going to help the receivers. But more importantly, you actually see the snaps fall dramatic for AD Mitchell, who saw the bench more than the field once Michael Pittman Jr. came back in. I was surprised to see on Sleeper that a lot of people are rostering Noah Brown. I have no idea why you are. If you are, for the love of God, let him go. Dontavian Wicks is a receiver that I'm going to be honest, very easily could have a spike week or two down the stretch. But the thing is, with some of these receivers, I'll throw Tyler Lockett into this list as well, where with Tyler Lockett, I could very easily see him having a 20-point performance in Week 12. That's in the range of outcomes here. But the thing with these secondary depth receivers is while any given week they have the upside to give you 15, 20 fantasy points, the floor is so low that realistically you can never actually get them into your starting lineup and predict when the production is going to come. And more likely than not, they are just viable best ball options that you're not going to get too many usable weeks, but it doesn't matter because one or two can get you there. But in your regular redraft league, that doesn't matter at all. And then Brock Wright is the last very easy drop. I mean, if you started him this past week because he had no Sam Laporta, good call. He comes away with a touchdown, but that was his only reception. Reality is this is not somebody that you can start in week 12, even if Laporta is out. But good news for you is there are a ridiculous amount of exciting tight ends here. And the first guy that I want to lead off with is going to be Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill very easily is the number one waiver wire pickup this week. Now, of course, this is going to be for the majority of leagues. I can't speak for every single format. I know we were just looking 2 weeks ago with some of the teams that people were submitting in the live streams. And yes, in your 8-team league, if you had someone like Chase Brown out there, you go ahead and you prioritize them. But I'm making these waiver wire videos more so for those 10-team or 12-teamers. Obviously, if you wanted to make exact adjustments for your exact league, what I would recommend doing is linking your league with flockfantasy.com if you play on Sleeper, ESPN, or Yahoo. And if you link your league with flockfantasy.com, which is completely free, on that My Teams page where you see the entire power rankings of your entire league broken down by position, you can see who has the strongest running back room, who has the strongest wide receiver room. You're actually going to see the best waiver wire pickups available to you based on rest of season rankings, which obviously is going to be a lot more personalized. I'll be diving into the names in this video, but I highly recommend you taking advantage of that free tool so you can get the best advice possible for the waiver wire. I will leave the link in the description and the comment section. Again, it's completely free over there on flockfantasy.com. But looking at Taysom Hill, the man drops 42 points. Now, obviously, the vast majority of this comes as a rusher, where he has 3 rushing touchdowns, goes over 100 rushing yards. I mean, he gets some receiving usage as well here. Taysom Hill just absolutely blows the hell up. And realistically speaking, going into the future, knowing that this New Orleans Saints team has absolutely nobody when it comes to running back outside of Alvin Kamara, the rushing role should remain pretty consistent here with Taysom. And by consistent, do I mean consistently seeing 100 plus rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns? No. Instead, I mean, he should consistently see about 5 carries in this offense with some involvement in the red zone, of course. And if you sprinkle that on to what you're getting as a receiver, where you actually have this past week, the 10 targets, the 8 receptions for the 50 receiving yards, I mean, I think that their receiving involvement should remain pretty consistent as well, understanding that you have no Chris Olave as well as no Rashid Shaheed in this offense. So I don't think Taysom's going to be an elite receiver every week or an elite rusher every week. But if you're going to be getting a little bit of both at a position where it's a complete barren wasteland outside of the top 4 options, I view Taysom as an every week starter going into the future. Now, of course, with that being said, it's a tough spot to go through and pick him up this week and not be able to play him until week 13 against the Rams. But I'd have Taysom as a mid-tight end 1 rest of year. And I think he is the number 1 waiver wire pickup this week. Outside of maybe if you need a quarterback, Bo Nix has been absolutely cooking. Now, obviously, if you play in a very serious league, you already have Bo Nix rostered. I mean, here, Bo Nix is rostered in 60% of leagues currently on Sleeper. I more so just wanted to give everybody their flowers. We had been ranking Bo Nix as a high-end QB2, more so just as a week-to-week streamer based off who he was playing that week and if the matchup lined up. But I think that we were wrong in that Bo Nix is 100% looking like he is trending towards instead being an actual every week starter for you at the quarterback position, where if you're looking at what you've had over the past month, Bo Nix is averaging about 23 points per game. I mean, Bo Nix here is actually a mid QB1 so far this season, and we have had some rushing upside at the beginning of the year. What we've seen is the rushing falls as the season goes on, but he's been a more prolific passer. And going into the future, I mean, you have some pretty good matchups here, like get to play the Raiders this week, And then afterwards, you get to follow up with the Cleveland Browns. I think very easily, Bo Nix is now probably a tier ahead of those week-to-week streamers. Jerry Jeudy is also a receiver that probably is going to be rostered in the majority of leagues here. Jerry Jeudy is rostered in 68% of leagues currently on Sleeper. So definitely more so a pickup if you're playing in that shallow 10-team league with only 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. And I really want to just reiterate our stance on the Cleveland Browns receivers, where I know a lot of people were very upset with us for being quote unquote too low on a Mr. Cedric Tillman. But my thing is, again, they are spreading targets out to Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, and Elijah Moore very consistently here with Jameis Winston under center. Or if you look over the past 3 weeks, you've seen Jerry Jeudy have on average 10 targets a game. You've seen Jerry Jeudy sit here on average and have about 16 fantasy points per game as well. This past week, you get the 142 receiving yards and the receiving touchdown. It's not like he does this just with the big play. You have 11 targets. So this is a high volume passing offense. While I do think Cedric Tillman is probably the wide receiver one in it based off what we've had with the large sample size, Jerry Jeudy is very close to Tillman, which is what we've been kind of saying for weeks. Now, our next best pickup is going to be another tight end here, where Jonnu Smith just continues to get better and better and better. Where if you're looking at Jonnu Smith since week 5, you've seen 8, 7, 6, 6, 4, and 8 targets. Jonnu Smith since week 5 has effectively been a mid-tight end 1 in fantasy. I mean, of course, you've had some of these dead performances like the game against Arizona where you only see 6 fantasy points. But I mean, outside of that, you've had 2 performances with over 20 points, including this past week with the multiple receiving touchdowns and the 100 receiving yards. And going into the future, it's very easy to see that this volume may remain consistent just based off the fact that this is an offense that's going to consistently project out to be a top 10 offense in the NFL in total points scored. And if you compare Jonnu to Jalen Waddle since week 5, again, we've seen the volume be there for Jonnu Smith, whereas Jalen Waddle's had 8, 2, 6, 2, 6, 3 targets. So this is a very large sample that we're looking at this point. This is a 6-game stretch where Jonnu Smith not only has dominated Jalen Waddle in terms of total fantasy points, but he has dominated Jalen Waddle with total receiving yards, receptions, targets, receiving touchdowns. Jonnu Smith has dominated Jalen Waddle in every major statistical category, and Jonnu looks like a viable tight end going into the future. Now, Quentin Johnston will be our next option. Again, I understand that maybe Johnston is going to be rostered in your league. Every single player that I've mentioned so far has been rostered in my league. But obviously my league's going to be a little bit deeper. I do want to reiterate, please make sure you go ahead and link your fantasy football team with the site. That way you can get the most accurate projections on who the best waiver wire pickups are in your league in particular. But nonetheless, Quentin Johnston is a receiver that, one, has actually really helped my underdog teams. And y'all know we drafted a ton of Quentin Johnston in underdog drafts this offseason. His price tag was about wide receiver 70. My thought process was, hell, we can draft him. Maybe he turns into a wide receiver 3. And while that probably doesn't help your regular redraft league, it could help you in a best ball tournament. And Quentin Johnston now actually is maybe turning into somebody that could help you in your regular redraft league. We have seen a touchdown scored for Quentin Johnston every week over the past 3. And where I was previously hesitant to come through and scream that Quentin Johnston all of a sudden is an extremely viable option going into the future, you actually are beginning to see these points come with volume and not necessarily just touchdowns, where you've had 3 touchdowns over the past 3 weeks, but this is the first week where we actually get Johnston up at 8 targets. Now, of course, you only have 2 receptions with this, so I'm definitely hoping that is better in the future. But I mean, you actually have a stretch of games where more likely than not, you actually are going to have Justin Herbert forced to drop back and throw the ball a ton against the Baltimore Ravens, the Atlanta Falcons, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, our next option is going to be Cam Akers. With Akers, he's probably available in your league. Right now, he's only rostered in 22%. Now, of course, he's rostered in the league that I play in, but besides that, If you are looking at Akers, this is now back-to-back weeks with the double-digit touches. Obviously, last week you did have the Aaron Jones injury, but by all reports, Aaron Jones was healthy this week for the Minnesota Vikings, and Cam Akers still had this role. Now, am I ever thinking that Cam Akers is a viable starter here at running back with Aaron Jones healthy? Of course not. But Akers is cementing himself as the, I don't want to say premium handcuff back, but as the handcuff back here in Minnesota, where if we have another injury to Aaron Jones, who's 29 years old and we've seen injuries from so far this season, then at that point, Cam Akers is 100% the running back in line to take that volume. Very similar to what we can say with Roschon Johnson in Chicago. There's no world in which I'm ever going through and starting Roschon Johnson in a game in which you have a healthy DeAndre Swift. But Roschon very clearly has cemented himself as the premium handcuff back here in Chicago, where not only are you getting the usage as the receiver, where Roschon sees the vast majority of snaps on third down and in the 2-minute drill, but we're also beginning to see Roschon Johnson get the usage inside the 5-yard line as well, which honestly isn't the first time that we've seen this so far this season, where you have had a total of 5 rushing touchdowns for Roschon Johnson off of not too many overall touches. I mean, those 5 rushing touchdowns have come off of, I want to say he's had 16 carries since the bye week. Before the bye week, you were looking at a total of 30 carries. So what? 46 carries gets you 5 rushing touchdowns. He has a goal line role. If you were to have an injury to DeAndre Swift, you have no Khalil Herbert in town. So at that point, Roschon should have the vast majority of work. Will Dissly will be our next option. If you are looking at Dissly, again, I want to reiterate that it is a spot in which we should probably expect to see more Justin Herbert dropbacks and more passing volume here in Los Angeles going into the future compared to what we saw at the beginning of the season, in large part due to the schedule getting a lot tougher than it was at the beginning of the year. And Dissly has seen target volume in what is a very good offense with a very good quarterback. I mean, over the past 5 weeks, we've seen 11, 7, 3, 6, and 6 targets. Zach Ertz getting a ton of target volume as well. Zach Ertz has one hell of a grab on Thursday night as well. To be completely honest with you, I would probably rather have Zach Ertz over Will Dissly myself. If you were looking at a streaming option, I know Bo Nix is probably not available in your league. Maybe Matthew Stafford is, where obviously we've actually seen a massive shift in terms of the play calling that we've had here for the Los Angeles Rams once Kupp and Puka have been back. Not particularly what they're doing through the entire game, but more so when they get to the red zone. You actually are seeing significantly more dropbacks from Stafford in comparison to where previously they were just giving the rock to Kyren Williams. Elijah Moore could potentially be a viable pickup if you really needed someone, just because if you go ahead and look at this target tree here in Cleveland yet again, you do have Elijah Moore sprinkled in as a receiver very similar to Jerry Jeudy, very similar to Cedric Tillman, that these are the guys that are getting all the volume, and these are really the only players drawing targets. And then if you were looking at some streaming defenses, again, I want to reiterate that it was very easy to make the call to pick up the Houston Texans this past week. I'm recording this right before the Cowboys game. I actually have the Texans defense, and I'm super excited about what to expect. Now, obviously, I may be looking like an idiot if the Cowboys go off. I'd be surprised if that happens. But if you're looking at the Texans here, they not only had the Cowboys this past week, but this week they're now going to be getting the Tennessee Titans, and then afterwards you get the Jacksonville Jaguars. So about the best little stretch of games you could possibly ask for, but actually looking at this, they're rostered in 80% of leagues. So I guess me picking them up last week was probably the last shot you could have done. So I'm going over to the Commanders. Commanders are only rostered in 29% of leagues. They get to play the Dallas Cowboys this week. Then they get the Tennessee Titans the week after. And then going over and looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers get to play the New York Giants, then the Carolina Panthers, then the Las Vegas Raiders. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers also have that beautiful stretch of games over the next 3 weeks. But I think that's all I got for you. I really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. Again, I would highly recommend just taking advantage of the free tool that we have over there on the site for you. I mean, it took us a lot of work to make it, but I think it's going to be super useful. I know everybody here is playing with different league formats, and their waiver wires are going to look different. So it should help you a ton. I'll leave the link in the description, comment section. It's flockfantasy.com. But again, if you play on Sleeper, ESPN, Yahoo, you can link your fantasy football team for completely free on the My Teams page. See the best waiver wire pickups and the guys that you should be looking to drop with your own team, plus the power rankings of your league, etc., etc., etc. But really do appreciate you. Really hope I was able to help you out in some way, and really hope we get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.